I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lancaster County Planning Commission of February 19th, 2020. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, please be sure to pick up a parking coupon on your way out for free parking. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note the Planning Commission action today is final on the following items. 1.2, Special Permit 15019B, 4.1C, Special Permit 20002, 4.3, Preliminary Plat 20001, 4.4, Special Permit 20003, and 4.5, Pre-existing Special Permit 23I. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held February 5th, 2020.
I move approval. Campbell. Second.
Second, Beckius.
Jerry?
Okay, Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Abstain.
Okay. Would you like to change your vote so we can move ahead?
Sure.
Okay. So that's a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 5-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes. Item 1.1A is annexation 19011 to annex approximately 10.55 acres. And the associated item 1.1B, change of zones 07063D from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District Planned Unit Development, both on property generally located at Northwest 56th and West Holdridge Streets. Item 1.2 is special permit 15019B to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises on property generally located at 321 Victory Lane. Again, this is final action on this special permit unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. And item 1.3 is street and alley vacation 20001 to vacate a portion of an alley between lots 1 and 12, block 1 of College View, generally located at South 52nd and Calvert Streets. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No.
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site? If any of these items?
Don't see any of those either.
Okay. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these consent agenda items? If so, please stand and state that item.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I would move approval of the items on the consent agenda.
Second, Finnegan.
Okay.
Jerry?
Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
There are no requests for deferral received prior to the meeting, but there is a request of an applicant to place an item on pending, which I will now ask Jerry to call.
We did receive a request of the applicant to place item 5.1, which is special permit 15062A, on pending until further notice. This special permit would allow for the expansion of the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises on property generally located at 925 Robbers Cave.
Entertain a motion?
I would move to move item 5.1 to pending.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion? Jerry?
Okay, this is to place special permit 15062A on pending until further notice. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Abstain.
Okay. Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Is there anyone present wishing to testify on this application at this time? Okay. So we'll now proceed to public hearing. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If, during your testimony, you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, will you please call the first public item?
Yes,
hearing item?
there's actually 3 associated items. I'll be calling them all together. We'll have 1 public hearing and then separate motions for action. Item 4.1A is annexation 20002 to annex approximately 11.15 acres. Item 4.1B is change of zone 20003 from AG to R3. And the associated special permit 20002 to allow for the development of a community unit plan with up to 77 multifamily dwellings with requested waivers, all on property generally located at 9500 Adams Street. I would note that the special permit is final action unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Staff recommendation for the annexation and change of zone is approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information learned while visiting the site?
I think we're good.
Okay,
Rachel?
Rachel Jones, planning staff. These are 3 related applications for an annexation, a change of zone to R3 residential, and a special permit for a new community unit plan. The location is approximately at 95th and Adams Streets. Here's the application boundary. This is Adams Street on the south and 95th Street here. The request is to build 77 multifamily dwelling units on 1 lot. There would be 7 buildings constructed with 11 units each. The buildings will take access off of a cul-de-sac extension of Blacksmith Road, and they will not have direct access to Adams Street due to the access management policy, as well as it is not feasible to make a connection to the east or to the north due to the drainage way that is there. To the west are single-family homes, and the developer worked out several conditions with the neighbors subsequent to the neighborhood meeting that was held to try and address their concerns. The main conditions were that they put in place a 20-foot wide outlot for permanent open space for separation that will be maintained by the HOA. They will be installing a 6-foot fence on the west and north sides. Limitation of buildings to maximum 2 stories and 35-foot standard zoning height. They will also be installing several traffic calming devices in the existing neighborhood streets. nearby. Those details will be determined with LTU, Transportation Utilities, but it's looking like there will be 3 speed humps on 94th Street, Renegade Boulevard, and Fremont Street. We had a memo to amend the staff report that was submitted, and this would be changing Blacksmith Court to a private roadway from a public street. The reason for that is that the driveway design that they were showing could not be accommodated on a public street. And so the condition has been updated to have that changed to a private roadway. The developers agreeing that they will maintain that, as well as they will maintain the portion of Blacksmith Road east of 95th Street, which are the segments that this development will use for access. And with that, I'll take any questions you have for me.
Rachel, at the end where Blacksmith Road dead ends, there's some properties there. Are they going to stay or be gone when we access it? Annex it, I'm sorry.
Yes, I think there's an existing house there kind of off the end of the street that will be redeveloped as part of this. As far as on either side of that portion of Blacksmith Road, there's a single-family home to the north, and this to the south is a detention area.
Thank you.
Rachel, I'm not sure if you'll be able to, if you know the answer to this one. In the conditions, or I shouldn't say the conditions, in the report, it talks about normally on a dead-end street, we like to have no more than 40 dwelling units. How did we come up with 40? Is that like a recommendation or a standard somewhere?
It appears in the subdivision ordinance. I don't know the history of how it came about, but I imagine it was determined over time in coordination with our emergency services, as far as the concern being to ensure that there is more than one way in and out of a large development.
Also, it talks about during construction, they're going to have that temporary access to Adams. I'm assuming that's because the neighbors didn't want heavy truck construction vehicles on the already built roads. Also, in the conditions, it talks about once those buildings are occupied, they can't have that access anymore. So I wanted to clarify, if they do this in stages and have one building ready for occupancy, then that temp access has to shut. Is that how it's supposed to be interpreted?
Well, I mean, I can look at how it's worded. I think the intent was that basically once the buildings started being occupied, that they wouldn't be using that access point because it's not actually allowed as a permanent access to Adams Street. So here's the staff report conditions. So it would be condition 2.1. All construction traffic shall use only the temporary construction access, which will be closed prior to issuing occupancy for any multi-family buildings. So, I mean, I suppose the applicant could weigh in on that, or LTU, but I would take that to mean that we wouldn't issue any occupancies until it was closed.
Okay, I'll double check with them and make sure that that was their intention.
Rachel, the traffic calming devices, they're fairly common in private streets and shopping centers and so on. But what is the city regulations on them in a public street?
Well, and I think LTU can speak to this as well, if they're here, but with these going in on a public street, they will be installed by the developer, but long-term, they will be maintained by the city.
Can you tell me of any other place in the city on a public street that they exist?
You know, I think that there's one northeast of South Point Mall.
Northeast of South Point.
On that street.
Bob serving LTU. There are some down by the trails at Browning Street. They're traffic tables. We don't allow speed bumps. We do allow elongated tables because they don't have the potential of damaging the cars, but they do slow down the traffic, and that's the type of thing we do here. It is within the scope of LTU's jurisdiction to allow or to cause these to be built.
And the table still allows for proper snow plowing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, people do not like speed bumps, and neither do we.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff right now?
No.
All right, applicant.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group, here on behalf of the Starostica Lewis Group, who is the applicant here. I will just put up this aerial real fast and give you a little more history on the project. You can see the greater Prairie Village North development here north of Adams Street, which was done by our firm back in 2006 and is now at almost full build out on its last phase. And this triangle where our application is today was kind of always off the radar, if you will, in terms of development, because it dropped off significantly and gravity sewer was going to be difficult to get to there. So last summer, actually, our applicant was approached by that landowner in that he does have a tenant in the house on the space there, and he farms it too, but it's a very difficult piece to get into with the floodplain. He has to come through, drive in the tenant driveway, and do it that way. So our client came to us and said, geez, what are our options here? And so there is a provision that if you have a private commercial development or a private development on one lot, that you can use a private force main to take your sewer back up into the gravity flow system. So we started exploring that. So in July, we had a meeting with the planning department. I told our client that we need to start there to see if multifamily would be feasible here and how we could do it. And we came out of that meeting with their guidance saying that they feel it would be appropriate if we tried to stay within the density of R3 zoning, which is what the adjacent single family is there in the Prairie Village North planned unit development. And so we went to the drawing board, started looking at different concepts. Well, and the other key element that they felt was needed was that the buildings not exceed 2 stories in height. And so with that, we put together a plan and then went to the neighbors in September after several months of work. And I just kind of have a color-coded thing here to explain a lot of what was done with them and some things that were instigated that we came with before the meeting with them and then some after. So I think it's been a really good give and take. The first thing is the green space there is an outlot that there are a lot of existing trees in that provide a nice amount of screening for the neighbors. And so we immediately told them we're going to preserve that, and or if you even want it, we'll dedicate it to you. And that's the conclusion of what we're going to do, is create an outlot there. The other thing they asked is then if from that 20-foot outlot, if we could keep the buildings another 20-foot back. That is the area in yellow that shows that there's an extra 20-foot setback from the outlot, so a total of 40 foot from their property lines. And then in red is a area where we've agreed to do a 6-foot high opaque fence that would come from Blacksmith all the way up here and over to screen the parking and garages there. The next thing they were wanted was an interior location for some of the dumpsters in terms of the garbage truck noise and things like that. And so those are shown in orange in these three locations. And then after that, on our at our own request, we did go and petition Public Works LTU to do a construction entrance. And that is shown in pink, where we'll more than likely do that with the existing driveway into the house. And to answer your question, Commissioner Core, the plan is to build all the buildings at the same time and generally achieve those occupancies all at the same time. 7 buildings, they want to go full bore. So I think we're fine with that note that just says that we have to demonstrate we've removed that before occupancy, but at the same time, that'll keep all the heavy construction traffic out of there. And that's really going to be important for the first few months of footings, foundations, some of the utilities, paving, and then after that, it's going to be down to the interior finish guys. So we'll remove that. And then Rachel also mentioned the provision that actually to get all these driveways to take access onto Blacksmith, we're going to convert that to a private roadway. It's public to the property line here. We're also entering into a provision with them that the applicant, the apartment complex, will be responsible for snow removal on this whole stretch. The city will advise their contractors that they don't need to do any snow removal from here back, that the apartment complex will take care of that, just so there's no confusion with them. And so all in all, we had good rapport with them. I feel Danae Kalkowski ended up representing them, and we worked through all the details, and you know, it's taken us quite some time. Like I said, this started in July. We met with them in September, and here we are now in February. And they did send, through Danae, a letter of support in terms of appreciation for the compromises that we've made. And the other important element here is that this land does sit generally well below, generally anywhere from 4 to 10 feet below their houses. And so the limitation of the 2-story building actually puts the eave line of the second floor of the apartment building with the eave line of a ranch home. And, the other thing we did agree to was no decks on the west side of these 2 buildings, only at-grade patios, no elevated decks. And then most of our lighting will be turned internally, and we have to comply with the standards for how much candle-foot of lighting can get off the property. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
At some point in the future, I assume that development to the east will happen. I know that there's floodplain, right immediately there, but farther out a little bit. And when the sewer mains and that kind of stuff extends, then will you abandon this lift station in order, or how will that work?
I'll go back to this one, Commissioner. That floodplain is extremely wide. It probably goes for the better part of almost a mile.
Okay.
So, and we looked at the ability to go out and tap into the Stevens Creek trunk sewer that's there. And it was like 1,300 feet. It was just economically unfeasible. So we really believe that it's a privately owned, so it's a responsibility of the apartment complex. Lift station will be there for the duration of the project as it exists. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should bring this up to you just to clarify, and because the neighbors have seen this and agreed to the locations. And Commissioner Campbell, to your questions. So we call them speed humps, not speed bumps, and worked with Lincoln Transportation and Utilities on, Lincoln actually doesn't have a standard. So we went to Omaha and we saw what they have, and they do have a standard. And so yes, on Browning Street, as Bob mentioned, where you come from South Point Mall and can transition into the Williamsburg neighborhood, they've done some there. These will be a little more advanced, if you will. And it's primarily the concern that apartment traffic, as well as just this, as this subdivision has grown out, we had this connection right here that basically goes from 84th by the Walmart, turns to Fremont Street, then Renegade, comes down to 94th and connects into Adams. if we and the planning department were preliminary plating this subdivision today, we wouldn't have made a long, continuous route like that. We've learned to try to break them up more. But that's how it was done and platted, and so, so these circles show the indications where we will do the speed humps. One here on 95th, one here on Renegade, and then one here, which is particularly important, we think, because this is where the neighborhood park will be constructed in perhaps a year or two for this subdivision. And so we think having them spaced out in that manner will help with a lot of the traffic that does take that route to either go to Walmart or get onto 84th Street to go north or south. So that's, I just wanted to clarify the location of them. We've worked with them on the design standard. It's a very generous compliance or offer by the developer. We estimate that 3 of those will easily cost over $20,000 to put in. But as you may know, he's also the developer of this subdivision, so he felt like it was a worthy compromise that he could do. And so we'll literally be taking out 2 to 4 panels of concrete to install those with the proper signage and those items. But I think the neighborhood was in great desire of those, and so I'm glad that Public Works agreed. So,
Thank
as
you.
well as our developer. So, sorry, I just
Yeah,
wanted to finish
great.
up that point. So,
Great. Any other questions right now? Okay, thank
okay.
you. Testimony in support, and this would be for all 3 items, so the change of zone, what all do we have going on here? The annexation, the change of zone, and the special permit. Testimony in support, come on up.
Hello, we just recently moved in there in December, and we moved from a previous home that they built apartments behind, and it was kind of a disaster. A lot of traffic problems, a lot of noise problems. And then when we went to resale the house, the biggest concern was the apartments behind there. Now moving into this area, looking at this, my concern is the traffic flow coming in off of Blacksmith. You got one access with all the additional vehicles coming in just from one access point. You know, that's going to be a lot of traffic coming in just off of 94th, turning down Blacksmith, going in. So my concern is there any way to get another access point in there? From my testimony that, or from the previous statements that you guys said, that there's no way for Adams Street access, but you'd put 77 additional housing units back there. That's a lot of traffic for that little stretch of the development. The second thing is floodplain. Obviously, that's pretty close to the floodplain. 95th Street, or Adams Street, got washed out there 2 years ago. Do they bring in fill for this? Are they allowed to add fill for the development? I don't know how that works. And so those are my main concerns, is just all the additional traffic, why they're building in such a small area, all contained by floodplain, and what are they gonna, how is that gonna work out?
Sir, can I get your name and address, please?
Matt Jonas, 3050 North 95th. So I'm backed up to, my backyard will be adjoining these properties now.
Okay, we'll find out the answers.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Testimony in support. Come on up. Oh, come on up. Oh, well, you can wait till opposition if you want. That's okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
Any other testimony in support? Okay, testimony in opposition.
Good afternoon. Brian Luther, 3110 North 95th. We're new construction as of June of 2019, and so we were very disappointed to get a letter about this, because we built there with the notion, and were told repeatedly by people along the tree line, that it was a floodplain and there would not be construction back there. So when we have the meeting in September, and it turns out to be a bigger meeting than what they're thinking, the paperwork that we get on the development And the gentleman that was just up here saying, having the meeting in September, the paperwork showed 2017 on the paperwork. So it wasn't just decided this summer. It's been in the works for a while. If it wasn't, why would the paperwork that we got at a public meeting be 2017? And so therefore, when we started construction in December of 2018 in a spot that's backing up to that floodplain, we had other places to go. And we also paid a premium on that lot that was going to be $15,000 more than when we were going to build over by Salt Creek, where our property was going to back up to Salt Creek, no backyard neighbors. So I don't understand the lack of candor on that with the developer or with this plan, that people were not aware and left in the dark about that. Secondly, we were told at the first meeting that it was a safety concern on Adams Street and speeds to leave the city, because that's the city limits, and there couldn't be an access there. But aren't we talking out of both sides of our mouths if we're going to have a construction entry there, and that's going to be safe for people coming into the city or leaving the city while construction's going on? So I don't understand that catch-22 about it's okay to have a construction entrance with heavy trucks, cement trucks, and the danger of that for traffic, and then that's going to be taken away. And then we just have that one access road. And I'm on 95th Street. My kids are grown. We're empty nesters. But the people on 94th Street are very upset and very concerned about that being a racetrack. From Blacksmith to come up 94 to the north, and then there's that curved road that's wide open right now to Walmart. And, that's wide open right now. There's no construction, but that's going to be eventually filled in. And, the thought of 77 vehicles or more coming from the apartments up 94th or 95th, that is concerning. And that's why the traffic bumps, the humps, whatever you want to call them, just to slow down traffic. And then the third thing is because we back up to that tree line, and that tree line is sparse where we're at. We counted 12 deer back there last night in that floodplain. So we're very upset about losing that of what we thought we were going to have. But it is what it is, if this is what it has to be. But I don't know if we have clarity on the integrity of the tree line and what that's going to mean. Is that going to be our expense, my lot, for the expense to build up the tree line? Because I don't want to look at apartments. I'm upset about that. I don't want to look at it. And so I want trees there as soon as possible, and I want the go-ahead to do that. And so that's really pretty foggy about, is the developer paying for the trees, or are we paying for the trees? And then if he's paying for the trees, are we going to get little tiny trees, and we're not going to have coverage for 20 years? So we don't have any clarity on that. And then at my 3110 North 95th, we have a sidewalk to nowhere right now. And I've been told that the sidewalk has to go through the tree line to the apartments because of city ordinance and so on. We have a pool in the backyard. We have a 5-foot fence. That's very concerning. If we have a sidewalk right there, right beside my property, from the apartments, of trespassing, of safety with people climbing the fence, that's a whole new thing. That of security that I'm going to have to encounter because of this development. So we don't. Does there have to be a sidewalk extension into the apartments? Because that's going to break up the integrity of the tree line. So that's another discrepancy about that we get control of the tree line.
Can you tell me a little more about, when you mentioned the fence, is it on the north side of your property line, or is it on the east side, or maybe both?
My fence? My fence is on the east side.
Okay.
And it goes up to the tree line.
Okay.
So it'd be facing the east.
And so right now, you don't have a fence that's in between your property and the sidewalk?
I do,
You do?
I do.
Okay.
yeah. But the sidewalk is right by my property.
Sure.
So it's a concern, and just that human nature that at some point, because my neighbor who was just up here was talking about people parking in the residential area and walking through yards to the development, to the apartments. And so they would walk right down by my property with the sidewalk right there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in opposition. Okay, I don't see any more. Staff questions. And this might be Mr. Simmering. Can you guys explain a little bit about the access management policy to Adams and why we are allowing a temporary construction site or access, but not continuous permanent access?
The basis of the access management, first is safety, second efficiency. So when we look at something like this, a short-term situation is much preferable to a long-term situation. The other option is to run that traffic through the neighborhood, and we think everything taken into consideration, it would be better to bring it off of Adams.
At some point in the future, when traffic counts warrant it, will the speed limit on Adams decrease
That could happen.
if there's enough traffic count? Okay. Can you guys also talk about the floodplain and how that might be more Rachel?
We had a grading plan submitted with this, and there is a portion of land here that's buildable, and it's been identified for future residential uses. They are perhaps bringing in fill as part of that. I think the applicant could talk about that. But, our watershed management division reviews those plans to make sure they're not negatively affecting the adjacent properties.
Rachel, could you show me that construction entrance on your map?
I don't think it's shown on this exhibit, but it would, presumably be somewhere here taking direct access off of Adams.
It's actually from the
Existing drive.
map that was shown. It's about the third unit in.
Okay.
Here, use this one.
Okay,
Yeah, that's,
there we go.
that helps. Oh.
Rachel, can you also address kind of why we have the sidewalk placed there and why we have to do that?
So the pedestrian easement that we're talking about is here. It was already it was already approved as part of the previous development with the intention of connecting future development to the east. We require those to help break up block length for pedestrian access. So it would have been required here because there would be a need, and otherwise it would be a long block. So, the intention and requirement was for the apartment development to connect to that on the other side.
Can you describe for me a little bit the tree line that exists along the backs of those properties and the development? I mean, where does it start? Where does it?
Well, I suppose that might be a better question for the applicant as well.
Okay.
But, there are trees along there, I mean, as people have said, and the intention is for them to be I'm sure, preserved as much as possible. And I'm not sure if there are private agreements as far as who is installing or paying for the trees to go
Okay.
in, if there are new ones being added.
Any other questions for staff right now?
No.
Okay, applicant.
Okay, so just to go through a couple issues here. So on the date, I don't understand where Mr. Luther's getting that. I guarantee, it's what, so I think what he's looking at is, we probably took one of our exhibits from, I believe this was Prairie Village North 16th edition, which we probably did in about that time frame, 2016, 2017. We probably came off of that CAD file and started to do our layout. And I'm suspecting in the title block area, where on the bottom right-hand corner, it usually lists the project, the date, and who reviewed it, as well as other items. It may have still had that 2017 date. But I can stand up here and assure you all that there was no conception of this project being a multifamily project until July of last year. Then on the speed humps, Lincoln Transportation and Utilities looked at 95th Street, 94th Street, and felt like none were needed on 95th Street. That the primary issue there was a concern is what we showed earlier, 94th, Renegade, and as it turns into Fremont. And then I wanted to put up a picture of an aerial that better shows that tree mass in this area. And so, you know, you can see, I believe the pedestrian easement comes right through here on Mr. Luther's property. There are some folks here that had a little thinner area. And the way that the note specifically written says that Outlot A shall be final platted as a 20-foot wide outlot that is to be dedicated to the Prairie Village North Homeowners Association for perpetual preservation and maintenance. No tree removal shall take place in Outlot A prior to final platting and dedicating to the HOA. So, I know the applicant would be more than happy to work with Mr. Luther. I think both planning and us and Danae, in working with the larger group of neighbors she represented, felt like that's something that we just weren't going to spell out here in the special permit. But I'm sure that the developer would be happy to do some more trees, perhaps even spade in some trees in his area. But it is in the winter, it does have some less coverage because there are deciduous trees. But that was also the reasoning why we agreed to do the 6-foot high opaque fence, 2-story buildings, all of those things. So, and it was not our decision on the PED connection, but I think there's an important element to remember here is there was a pedestrian easement stemmed into this property. There was a road stemmed into this property with the anticipation that there would be a future use, residential use of some sort there. So, and I think that's about it. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I know there was some concern about previous washout on Adams Street there. Can you talk about how when you develop this site, what kind of mitigating treatments you do?
Sure. Yeah, I believe there were some issues with the culvert of this tributary right here, which actually goes clear back into the Regent Heights area on the west side of 84th Street. Drains through here, comes up here. So the county's addressed that. They've replaced that culvert. I think they've upsized it. I don't know their design criteria. What I do know is our responsibility is to stay out of the floodplain and/or make sure that our buildings are out of it. And so, as Rachel said, when you look at the details of the site plan, this includes, these are the cross-section elevations for the floodplain. And so we've established what that is. Those 4 pad sites actually on that side of the development will have minimum floor elevations that'll have to be certified by building and safety to be at least 1 foot above the floodplain. So, and we even though I think watershed management might have agreed with a waiver of detention on this project, we have integrated 3 detention cells, which was somewhat difficult. We had the tight area there, but so we'll be fully detaining, as anybody else in town, the 100-year flood event. And so, but to specifically answer your question about Adams Street, I would assume that when the counties replaced that culvert, they did upsize it to perhaps stop the overtopping.
Tracy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, if I'm looking at this correctly, on the sidewalk that comes through, it appears that, without a scale here, I'm guessing, but it appears that it's 20-foot wide between those 2 lots.
So, yeah, we made a transition, as did most other design firms a few years ago. Those used to just be an easement, and so the 2 owners on either side of it owned up to it, and we converted to platting them to outlots. And I believe they are a 15-foot wide easement, Commissioner, with a 5-foot easement on either side.
And a 5-foot sidewalk.
Right. So your standard sidewalk as you've had in front of your house. It's not a trail per se with just standard sidewalk, 5 foot.
Mike, when you were talking about the fence line, or the tree line and the fence in there, and you said the developer might be willing to plant some trees in there, what size are you anticipating? Like a 1.5-inch stalk or something a little bit?
No, I think it's, he would have access to perhaps even bringing them in with a tree spade,
So
to where they're
larger.
more of a, maybe not completely mature tree, but several years of growth, where you get, as Commissioner Campbell will know, you can get up to a 90-inch tree spade that can, on average, then handle a 9-inch caliper trunk, or a 54-inch tree spade can handle a 5-inch caliper trunk.
So it would be a pretty tall tree.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
And they'd be willing to take on the cost of that?
Yeah, I think we'll just represent verbally that they'd be willing to do that.
Okay.
On those areas where, because there is one other house that has some gaps, just with some trees that have been taken down. In the note that we have in there, we just wanted to ensure them that during the construction, there will be, those trees that are there will not be touched. And if we need to do some additional individual planting for some of those, we talked about it at the meeting, neighborhood meeting, and we've communicated that with Danae, so I think it was just an item that we felt was better left out of the specific notes.
Sure.
So,
It might be nice even to use more evergreen than
right,
deciduous.
right. So we can work with them on selection of species too.
Can you bring that map, that overhead map of the tree line back up? That at the very south end, with the large clump of trees there, I assume those all have to disappear.
Right. So this house has now been built, but the trees that are within the 20-foot outlot will remain. And then actually, it'd be hard to envision, Commissioner Campbell, but if we switch to a private street from there, if we were to do that as a public roadway, as we originally have shown it on here, we have to clean out the full 60-foot width, even though the road's only 27. As a private roadway, we'll be able to leave those trees come down in closer to, actually to the back of curb and sidewalk. So,
okay.
but yes, these will go, but anything in that 20-foot outlot there, generally from now back of curb of the private roadway, will be able to stay.
And the same would be true clear on the north end, is that not correct? Those trees in the center would disappear? No, that stays.
Okay.
But the trees to the east of that 20 feet?
Oh, right in here, you mean?
Yes.
That is, no, those are actually in the floodplain, Commissioner Campbell, I'll show you here. And so we're not getting into there either. Those are generally located right here.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And it drops off and it's floodplain, so we won't be doing anything with those either. So that does help these houses here.
Yes.
Even though we also agreed to do that fence clear back to this location, and I think that's why they agreed that was a good termination point, because then they're buffered by the trees for sight distance.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, could I get copies of those maps?
Sure.
If not those, just email them
Yeah.
to me
Here, I can give you all of them.
for the record.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Jerry?
Okay, El Badre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
I would move that we approve the annexation number 20002.
Second.
Discussion, and feel free to discuss all three at the same time if you want.
But we're voting
On
separately.
just one, yes.
That's correct.
I think the developer has been very responsive to the neighbors and has now added, for the record, a willingness by the developer to add some trees if there are open spaces along that 20-foot right-of-way or outlot. And this appears to be a very good use of that irregular piece of ground.
Any other comments right now? Okay, Jerry?
Okay, this is for the approval of annexation 20002 to annex approximately 11.15 acres, generally located at 9500 Adams Street. El Badre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, we need a motion for approval for changes zone 20003 from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District on property generally located at 9500 Adams Street.
So moved. Beckius.
Second, Campbell.
I'm just going to echo some of what Commissioner Campbell said. I appreciate the developer kind of going above and beyond on this and working with the neighborhood. And sometimes it's difficult to blend in new development with something that's already existing, but I really thank them for meeting with the neighborhood and putting a lot of those concessions in there. I think the annexation is appropriate. The change of zone is the right designation, and I think the special permit looks great too. Jerry?
Okay, El Badre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, we need a motion for special permit 20002 to allow for the development of a community unit plan with up to 77 multifamily dwellings with waivers.
So moved, Campbell.
Second. Beckius.
Jerry?
And there is
Oh.
per the revised staff report, I'll just note that.
Please.
El Badre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, next, two items are associated. Item 4.2A is annexation 20003 to annex approximately 71.83 acres and adjacent rights-of-way, and the associated change of zone 07063E from AG Agricultural District to H3 Planned Unit AG Agricultural District and H3 Planned Unit Development to R3 Planned Unit Development with updates to site layout on both generally located on property at Northwest 48th and West Holdridge Street. Staff recommendations for both the annexation and change of zone is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
No. Rachel?
Rachel Jones, planning staff. We have related applications for an annexation and an amendment to the I-80 West Lincoln Business Center planned unit development. We are located along West Holdridge Street, bounded by Northwest 56th Street on the west and Northwest 48th Street. This exhibit shows the area of annexation. And then we have change of zones from Ag to R3 PUD, and then a change of zone from the existing H3 Highway Commercial PUD also to R3. The changes would amend the plan for the area south of Holdridge Street, primarily to show the proposed Lincoln Public Schools high school site, which is this area here. The area west of the school site is anticipated for residential uses. They are designating 287 dwelling units for that area. And then south of West Vine Street are showing a highway commercial area with up to 401,000 square feet. There is a revised annexation agreement that will accompany these at City Council. It will identify improvements to the adjacent arterial streets as well as traffic signals and other improvements. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Rachel, can you talk a little bit about the commercial piece to the south of, is that Vine?
Yes.
Are there any restrictions on those pieces at all in addition to the regular zoning overlay?
They will simply follow H3 zoning allowances.
Okay.
Tracy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Rachel, that access road that's shown, does that remain north of the interstate there on that plan in the H, or in the commercial?
Let's see. You said an access road coming off of,
It's just north of the interstate.
I guess maybe LTU could assist me on this one. if
I'm sorry, I
they-
can't understand.
Maybe LTU could assist on this one. I'm not sure of that access point.
Bob Siring, LTU. I do not recognize on this plat what you're referring to.
It's on, it's in the first part, and it's about the third map in. If it helps any, you can take a look at it here. Page 7, you said?
No, I think 9.
Take a look here, Bob. Yeah.
Does it appear on this aerial?
Is that right?
Yes, that's it, Rachel, you've got it. The very south there, just north of the interstate.
Talking about this one?
Yes.
Okay. I would guess the intention is for that to go away in the long term.
So then go back to your map of that area. Where would there be access from 56 to 48?
The access to 56th Street would be here at West
Vine.
Vine Street.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's where they
Thank
would
you.
take access.
It does look like that access road is still on there on that, but, okay. Any other questions for Rachel right now? Okay, applicant.
Good afternoon. My name's Kent Seacrest, representing Ringneck LLC, who is the property owner, who has been very busy working with the Lincoln Public School System on creating this new exciting vision, and with the voter support, new high school that will hopefully be breaking ground this spring. Derek Aldridge is here, attorney for Lincoln Public Schools, who can address any of the high school questions that you might have. Also tonight, this afternoon is Eric Bright, Olson Associates, who's been assisting Lincoln Public Schools, and Brad Marshall has been assisting Lincoln Public Schools as well as Ringneck in this project as we've gone forward. Rachel did a good job explaining what this application's about. Ringneck is the landowner, and we're amending the existing PUD that we did some time ago, and we have a contract with Lincoln Public Schools. So they're buying that middle piece from Holdridge down to Vine Street that you saw on the map, and we are proposing about 401,000 square feet of commercial south of Vine, which is right next to the interchange and interstate system. This is in compliance with the comprehensive plan, both land use, phasing. There will be, as Rachel mentioned, a conditional zoning and annexation agreement that will talk about the high school being in the first phase, and then south of Vine will be the subsequent phases we'll annex later on when development is ready there. And bottom line is, we have had meetings after meetings after meetings after meetings with the city staff and Lincoln Public Schools and the developer, working out a lot of details on how to break ground this spring and get a high school there in 2 years and get the infrastructure there. And all those meetings have been, in my opinion, very, very successful. And the applicant is in front of you today in full agreement with the staff recommendations. We've worked everything out. And I just want to thank Steve Henricks and Rachel Jones and Tim C. and Bob Semrain and the LPS team for meeting so often and working out and keeping good common sense and getting the vision of the comp plan to be implemented. And with that, be glad to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Kent, in the middle of the school ground, there's a darker area. Is that a detention basin presently?
I'm looking at this map. Is this the map you're referring to?
Right to the northeast on that map, that circle, the small circle?
Right here?
Yeah.
That is not a detention facility, is it? No.
It's just a darker cropland?
Oh, you're talking the aerial?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I assume that's some type of crop. Do we know? Brad Marshall.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brad Marshall with Olson. This development has been around for a little while, and the darker area they actually see there was started to be graded several years ago for the commercial area coming off of Vine Street. It actually coincided with some dirt work that was going on with the adjacent improvements to Interstate 80, and so there was an opportunity to do so. But that's what you see there on that darker image.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Testimony in support, and this would be for both items.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Aldridge. I'm with the Perry Law Firm here in Lincoln, and I'm here on behalf of the Lincoln Public Schools. A couple of people in groups that Lincoln Public would like to thank in this process, obviously the Planning Commission, but also the staff members of the Planning Department, Lincoln Transportation Utility, Lincoln Water System, Lincoln Electric System, City Attorney's Office, for all their collaborative efforts in getting us to this place that we're at now. As Mr. Seacrest mentioned, we've had a lot of meetings amongst the groups, had a lot of collaborative efforts to try to get to this stage in the process. I think we've been very fruitful and very effective in getting there. LPS would also like to thank the design professionals, Clark Anderson Partners and Olson in their efforts. They also like to thank Ringneck, the developer, and their team. And most importantly, Lincoln Public would like to thank the community for their showing of their trust and support of LPS, as shown by the recent passage of the bond issue election that allows this all to go forward for Lincoln Public. This is a very important project and site for Lincoln Public Schools. As you know from the documents you have before you, LPS plans to build a high school there and athletic and activities complex with the intention of opening that by the fall of 2022. That's all I really have. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer any questions on behalf of the site that LPS is looking to purchase in this.
I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in support. Okay, testimony in opposition. All right. right. Any staff questions?
Yeah, I do. Rachel, the property that's being kept by the current owner is going to be highway commercial just to the south of Vine Street. But I didn't see anything in the report. There are no concerns evidently from staff about permitted H3 uses abutting to the high school with the 35-foot separation between that use and the high school. Is that correct?
No, staff did not identify any
Okay.
concerns there.
And then it looks like there's residential then directly to the west there that's also 35 feet away from H3 zoning. Is that typical?
I think that the primary concern with staff and residential uses abutting commercial is more when there's an industrial use present or allowed. A use that would have hazardous chemicals or potential for hazardous chemicals. So the highway commercial districts are not generally a concern to the health department.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Applicant, any rebuttal? No? Okay.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Finnegan.
Jerry?
Alpadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Wyman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
I would move approval of annexation 20003 and the change of zone.
Do them separately.
Oh, do them separately,
Hold
okay. Annexation.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion.
The only, I hope to see the permitted uses in H3 just to the south of the site. I hope they don't get too heavy as to what one can do on H3 permitted, whether that's, car maintenance, whether that's spraying cabinets, things like that, that might impact the surrounding neighborhood, especially since we're talking about siting a high school here. But the school itself is a ways away. The activities area seems to be closer, but I'll go ahead and support the site and hope that Lincoln Public Schools system is taking that into consideration when negotiating with this site with this developer.
Any other comments right now? Okay, Jerry.
And this is for the conditional approval of annexation 20003. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Wyman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
I would then move change of zone 07063E.
Second, Finnegan.
I think the annexation makes sense. It's contiguous to the current city limits, and the change of zone looks appropriate. I do appreciate Commissioner Beckius's concerns about what could possibly go into that H3. So we'll just kind of have to keep our eyes on that as things develop. Jerry?
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of change of zone 07063E. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Raymond Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, moving on. Under preliminary plats, we have item 4.3, preliminary plat 20001 to allow for the development of 36 additional single-family lots and one additional outlot on 12.08 acres with associated waivers on property generally located at North 103rd Street and Shorefront Drive. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Again, this is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I don't see
No.
any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
No. George?
Thank you, George Wesselhoff, planning staff. So where we're at here This is Waterford Estates. We're just north of O Street. This is north 104th. We're south of Shorefront Drive, so south of the lake. And as mentioned, we're on a 12-acre site that is currently shown as conceptual on the preliminary plat. They're proposing 36 additional single-family detached lots and 1 additional outlot. The property is bounded by development on all 4 sides. There's Waterford Estates Townhome addition to the south, Waterford Estates First addition to the west, developing single-family detached residential of Dominion at Stevens Creek addition to the north, and Waterford Estates 22nd addition to the east. A little background, this preliminary plat was originally approved in February of 2007. The area of amendment was part of an outlot for future multifamily at that time under R4 zoning proposal. All the streets are proposed as public, and there would be, let me get that exhibit out. So again, where we're at is this location here, just south of Shorefront Drive. There's 2 north-south new public streets. There'd be single-family lots on the west side of the western street. There'd be the outlot for detention. There'd be another street, North 103rd, with additional single-family lots. There were 5 waivers originally identified, and I would point out that actually only 2 remain. The first waiver that was identified was respective of lot lines not being radial to the street right-of-way. The ordinance actually provides for where it makes sense for that to be allowed without having to specifically request a waiver. So that is not required. The last 2 waivers that were requested had to do with reductions of the street right-of-way and street design, which the applicant has agreed to withdraw those waiver requests. So the only 2 waivers that are left, which staff supports and we're in agreement with on the applicant, is the sidewalk installation waiver on the east side of North 102nd, which would this would be along by the outlot, and then also the waiver to allow sanitary sewer mains to run opposite the street grades, which is a common waiver request. And so the recommendation then is conditional approval, and with that I can answer any questions.
Go ahead.
On the layout of the lots, there's a space, I think it's 103rd Street. Is that to allow water to go into the detention basin? There's 2 lots north, and then there's a space, and then the rest of the lots south.
I think so. The applicant's engineer can confirm that. I don't have that level of detail with me, but the applicant's engineer can confirm.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Okay. Applicants.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Matt Langston with Olson, representing Waterford Estates. This is a pretty standard, just formality of forming up what has always been shown as conceptual, pretty much. The one waiver that we're requesting that's kind of not a typical one is the sidewalk, and there aren't any houses on that side, so we feel that that's very reasonable. And I guess with that, do you have any questions?
I would ask you the same.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't address
yeah.
that. Yes, so that the area where there is the space, that is a low spot in the road, and so that is to convey the 100-year storm event.
Great. Down to the end of the detention basin.
Correct, yeah, right down into the lake.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Testimony in support of this application. Testimony in support, okay. Testimony in opposition. Testimony in opposition. I don't see any. Any further staff questions? No? Applicant, do you want to come back up? No? Yes? Nothing? Okay.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Jerry?
Edgerton.
Okay, Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the right page.
Move approval of the preliminary plat 20001 with the recommended conditions.
Second, Campbell.
Discussion. This looks like a pretty straightforward application and
Yep.
looks good to us, I guess. So Jerry?
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of preliminary plat 20001. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, next item is item 4.4, special permit 20003 to allow for a community unit plan for up to 192 dwelling units with waivers to setbacks, lot area, and lot width on property generally located at the southeast corner of Old Cheney Road and South 93rd Street. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information that you learned while visiting the site?
No.
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department, filling in for Brian Will. This is an application that is on the south side of Old Cheney, east of 93rd Street. The site is currently owned by Lincoln Public Schools. They had purchased the site for a middle school. That then over time, as they were doing their planning, they've instead located the Moore Middle School at 84th and Yankee Hill Road. And so looking at if there was any other options for this site, they decided there was not, and so it is now available for development. The development plan that you have before you is for a special permit called Garden View Heights. It is generally a mix of single-family detached units, single-family attached units, with a few 3 and 4 attached units, each on their own lot. To the south of the development, you can see there's an area of open space. That is the pipeline planning area, and so there's the area that has generally been identified that is least desirable for residential uses. So as part of their plan, they are showing a variety of common open space in that area. Rather than having any development in there, there's also a small potential for additional parking. That parking is in case that area is actually adopted, so to speak, by the larger homeowners association, and people in the entire association might want to go there and drive over to the site and park. Let's say there's a community garden or something there that might benefit the entire association. Otherwise, if it's just simply owned by this association, there wouldn't be the need for that additional parking space. But that does provide that option. There is a waiver in this application in terms of the block length, but all the adjacent properties were developed without any street connections, so there's really no way for them or reason for them to provide a street connection to the adjacent property. To the adjacent property south of the pipeline planning area is a row of townhomes that were developed within the neighborhood. Would note that generally this mix of different housing types are very compatible with the adjacent development in all directions, and is very much in keeping with the goals of the comprehensive plan to have a mix of housing types within every neighborhood. There is a memo that we sent out today, which is staff condition 1.111. Do apologize that we didn't get our comments till late on this one, and so this is in regards to a sanitary sewer line needing to be shown. So our staff report has been amended to add that condition. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the special permit.
Can you point out that special parking thing again? I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing.
Sure. Down here on the southern end, they have potential for a trail. They're just, for the moment, just trying to show some conceptual uses. Maybe there's a garden, maybe there's a gazebo, that type of thing. And so there's a small parking lot here that would be listed so that in case the larger association actually took over ownership and maintenance of this so that everyone could use the open space, the idea is that people could come and park in that lot and enjoy the open space.
So it's just that little section right there? It's not these others kind of in the middle?
Yeah,
those.
These units here front on the street to the north, but their driveways are on the south. And so this is just simply additional parking for these residents to the north.
And so those extra parking spaces there will be built?
Yes, we're looking at this as either parking for the residents or guest parking in the back. There would certainly also be parking that would be allowed along the public street to the north.
I was a little confused when I was looking at the site plan. It talks about, reducing some of the setbacks on block 1. Can you show me block 1?
So in general, what we have is you have both a block, these two blocks here, as well as this block over to the east. This is block 1 that comes up. What you have is that this is something that has been done over at 33rd and by Superior, by northeast of that, same builder, where they have done a little bit smaller houses that sit on their own individual lot. And so you have a reduction in setbacks for those lots. So in particular, some of these lots here, they will actually still have a 20-foot setback to the east, but to their own lot line, their setbacks are reduced. So we have, in essence, a lot of 0-foot setbacks in here, but that's just the house to its own little lot line. Around it will be a very typical open space that you might find yards, but they're going to be owned and maintained by an association versus you having your own individual lot. But you do have a mix of different housing types in here. Over here with the townhomes, it's going to be much more traditional where you have your own lot, you own the front, backyard, side yard, that type of thing.
So does block 1 really circle around, like kind of all the way around this development?
Yes, technically, block 1 goes all the way around because there's no street connections within it breaking up the block.
Other questions for staff right now? Okay, thank you. Applicant.
Good afternoon. Kent Seacrest, representing Pine Lake Development, LLC. With me today is our talented engineer, Brad Marshall from Olson, to help answer questions that you might have. This is kind of the yin to the yang with the high school site in that this is part of the same development team where Lincoln Public Schools owns this site and they want the Ringneck site, and Ringneck has now the option to acquire this site. Now, what's going to happen, Ringneck is assigning their option to Pine Lake Development, LLC, which was the original developer of the Vintage Heights areas. And so that's why we're here talking about another Lincoln Public School site. But this will not be a middle school. This will be the new layout that we have shown you. We have met with the neighborhood on January 16th. Lots of good questions were raised. This is a series of kind of new products. We have, every once in a while, we have new urbanism, Vintage Heights, and this is kind of a new set of products. It's not the first time, but it's a series that we have seen. Dick Campbell's done something unique. Hallbrook's done something unique, and this is one of those unique opportunities that we want to talk to you about. This will be smaller units in many instances, but not all. The townhomes are pretty traditional, but some of the new products could be smaller than what you have normally seen. But these are not tiny homes. Okay, I just want to be sure we get that out the door to you. Here's an example of some product of what we're talking about building in these more cottage, smaller dwelling units, duplexes, up to fiveplexes, to make it go forward. What we are doing, though, is very consistent with the comprehensive plan. I just want to say that about 10 times to you. The comprehensive plan has many, many times called for, and development hasn't done a very good job of trying to increase density, create more housing product, housing choices for people. This is definitely hitting the comprehensive plan between all four corners, and there will be lots of new housing, not apartments, but just choices of housing. It does increase density compared to the traditional neighborhood that could be to our east and to our west, but it providing new opportunities for people when they want to downsize in the neighborhood to come in and come into this part for the smaller units or things of that nature. There is a comprehensive plan requirement or goal of encouraging new development to achieve density greater than 5 dwelling units per acre. We are, even at this density, at only 4.8. So we do not hit the comprehensive goal, but we come as close as most in the R3 type zone area. And we just want to point out that this is not a rezoning, okay? This zone has been there since day one on Vintage Heights. This is still R3 zoning, which is one of our lowest zone areas. This is what we zone, what you and I would call the newer growth areas of Lincoln. So this is the same zone, but the zone does allow community unit plans and density that, in this case, we're not even using all the density that we're entitled to. Staff pointed out we're entitled to like 199, and we're just at 133. So we're not using like 58 units along the way. So with that, I just want to point that part out to you. Steve mentioned the gas line easement that goes through the site. You will see that the site is the blue and the southern piece. We have a lot of homes that are in the yellow area. Some dub that the blast zone. If it ever exploded, that could be the damage area. But that was done before we knew about the blast zone. But we're complying with the health department requirement. And so the bottom 7 acres, or about a quarter of the site, isn't being used. But we're trying to use it for open space purposes, as Steve pointed out to you earlier along the way. I also want to point out that this school site is not part of the neighborhood covenances. It was always intended to be a school site. It does not belong in the covenances, so therefore it's not bound by the covenances along the way. And I thought staff did a good job on their waiver discussion by Steve. We want to thank Brian, Will, and Steve for their help on this. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Can you point out where you enter this development? Where are the entry points?
Let me see if I get that map with me. Do we have that map? Here it is. Yeah, I can use this. I'll blow it up. Okay. We'll go ahead and point them out.
Got to do something. I'm here. Brad Marshall with Olson. The development would actually, most people entered off of Old Cheney off of 93rd Street, which is at the northwest corner of the proposed development. I'll point out that is most of the entrance points have been constructed in a situation like this where the developments are already built out. Access management policy would prohibit additional access being taken onto an arterial roadway. And so that did prohibit any additional streets being connected directly out to Old Cheney. And on an internal roadway system, we have two connections, one at Maryvale, and then another one that kind of splits two cul-de-sac streets here that we're calling Stone Hill Lane. And so those would take access off of 93rd.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, we received a letter that was opposed to the townhouse lots along 93rd having driveway accesses out. Is that true that they combine to one driveway connecting to 93rd between the two units?
Well, an attached unit, attached single family would have two units, and each unit would be able to take one driveway out. So
You'd have one per lot then?
well, yes, one per lot.
Okay.
That is true.
Other questions for the applicant?
In this mix, you're talking about the tiny, or the cottages, the smaller houses, not tiny houses, but smaller. Are they in the affordable range that we've talked about?
Let's talk affordability. That's a topic of big importance. Often when we use that term, we're talking low income.
Yeah.
I would not qualify these as low income. Affordability is an issue now in all price ranges in Lincoln because, in my opinion, land values have gone up higher than wages. So affordability needs to get under control at all segment groups. These homes are priced, up to $290,000, $250,000 to $290,000. So these are not what you and I would call 30% or 60% of the area mean income standard of low income, but these would be middle income. In fact, I would call them the missing middle that we're now seeing as a national concern in our country.
Or senior citizens wanting to downsize, right?
Yeah.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony and support. Testimony in support of this application.
Good afternoon. Jason Becker, 9645 St. Gregory Circle, just east of the proposed. I'm here today representing the Homeowners Association of Vintage Heights, and I'd like to just read a letter on behalf. Dear Commissioners, today you consider an application for special permit to allow a community unit plan, CUP, in our neighborhood. We, as the Board of Directors for the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, submit this letter in support of the proposed development. Members of our board have met with development team, builders, architects, engineers, realtors on several occasions leading up to this hearing. In fact, we believe we have exercised a great deal of diligence in vetting what the proposed development involves, how it squares with our neighborhood overall, and how it may impact our current residents. Careful consideration of the current proposal, along with the consideration of other potential uses should the application be denied, and the views voiced by various current residents, has convinced our board of directors to document its support of this application. Our support stems from our understanding that the proposed development closely adheres to the CUP plot presented to both the current residences and the Vintage Heights Homeowners Association Board of Directors. The plot requires non-rental based dwellings that exceed investor performance 10 to 15%, predominantly with 2-stall garages and basements. The projected price ranges for the residences are between $275,000 to $350,000. That aligns with the prevailing home values for our current neighborhood residences. We further understand that all residents in the proposed development would become dues-paying members of the Vintage Heights Homeowners Association at levels commensurate with other similarly sized lots currently located in the neighborhood. We also understand that the proposed outlot would be eventually conveyed to our association with potential amenities that include a utility storage shed for our use. In sum, our belief is that the development that achieves the understanding set forth above will enhance the living experience of our entire neighborhood. For these reasons, the Vintage Heights Homeowners Association Board of Directors supports approval of the pending application for special permit. So on behalf of that, I appreciate allowing me to come up and read this today, and thank you.
I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
Sorry. You had said somewhere in your statement there something about, this is not verbatim what you said. But something
Please don't
along-
make me read this again, please.
No, not at all. Something along the lines of non-rental units.
Right,
or something.
right.
Could you?
Yeah, it's important as a neighborhood that we want this to be an owner-occupied development.
Sure.
That's our goal.
Okay.
And as an investor is going to be looking at something that's going to have to make sense to him with his multiples and his calculations. And with what these homes are going to be priced at for purchase, it really doesn't make sense probably for an investor to purchase these and then turn around and use them as a rental. So that was a very important thing as a board to protect our neighborhood. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that you understand that that could still be the case.
I'm not understanding, I'm sorry.
That an investor could buy some of these properties and rent them out. You understand that?
100%.
Right? Okay, very good. I just wanted to
100%.
make sure that you didn't think
Absolutely.
that that's not a possibility.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Testimony and support.
Marty Fortney, 3600 Calvert. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to speak. I'm one of the two builders that'll be building in this development. The original guard view on the north side of town was accumulation of a lot of people, but primarily a brainchild of what I brought to you all here a couple years ago. And I wanted to give a report on what that has produced in the trenches, because at that time, we were speculating. But before I do, I'd like to look at one statistic here that's concerning overall. I've been building in Lincoln since '92, and what I see here in terms of multifamily, when it outpaces single family in certain years, almost 2 to 1, that's very concerning, because our young people should be owning homes for the most part. That's still part of the American dream. That's what I believe. Having served in the military as a combat Marine veteran, I can tell you that I think we're still fighting for some of the benefits of being in America, in this country, is to own your own home. And it is increasingly difficult to do that in Lincoln. So as the comment was made earlier, I think it's possible that some of these home sites would be $250,000. It's quite possible. We're trying to figure out the pricing still. What we're doing up north is between, it started out, our first home sold for $189,950. That was last year. We completed 22 homes. There's 22 families out of the first 32 lots. Out of those 22 families, 90% of them are 35 and under, and I would say mostly 30 and under, and 90% of those came from apartments. They're first-time home buyers. Ironically, the other 10% are those that are, we call right-sizing, but those three customers were at least 55 or older. Kids are out of college, and they don't want to be connected necessarily to a townhome. They want a single family, a detached. And so that was kind of surprising to see that, because they're 2 stories. And in this development here, we are putting a single-story ranch as part of the cottage. The lots are a little bit larger. That would allow for single-level living completely, which would accommodate 55 and older, because I know I'm getting close and I don't want to do any stairs. So there's a couple of things to report. The buyers, they selected at Garden View up north, because they're very similar products, and you saw the pictures of them. We are putting in similar finishes that you would see in a $400,000 home. I built plenty of $400,000 or $500,000 homes. So the finishes are very similar. They're just a little smaller, a little more compact. But our buyers up there, the 22 families that we've put in there last year, that was our first year. They're buying based on price. That's one. Number two is the ability to have an association maintain the lawn and do the snow. The young folks just aren't interested in doing that. I don't blame them. I don't like doing it. And we have a single-family home, so now we're maintaining lawns that are consistently green throughout, and there's a real benefit of that to all the neighbors. And we're doing it for a very affordable price. If you call somebody to mow your lawn, a single lawn, you might pay $30 or $40. We're getting it done for $8 or $9 or $10 for each mowing up there. So it's buying power. That's what the association is providing, as long as it's managed correctly, and that's always a challenge. The other one, the third option, is the ability to be a part of a community. And those folks, those buyers primarily, they don't need to have a big yard. They don't really want them. They're not hanging out on the porch. They want a place for their barbecue, but they are not looking to take care of a big yard. A lot of them have pets, so we have provided some provisions for a dog run along the side or fencing along their house. But then that's primarily the reason for the green space to the, in this case, to the south on the Vintage Heights lots. Thank you for your time. Any questions I can answer?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Testimony and support.
Good afternoon. Doug Croker. I'm one of the other builders of the project I'm doing, the townhomes. I recently built 19 townhomes in Village Gardens, and I was really drawn to this project because of the similarities, the architectural styles, the landscaping, the large green space and all that. And I just think there's a great need for this. Ours all sold out really quickly there. And I think it'll add value to the area and value to the homes around it.
Great. Thank you.
Pardon me?
Can I get your address?
6300 Country View Court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony and support. Testimony in opposition.
Hello, Michael Basinger, 9549 Mortensen Court. My property backs up to this vacant lot now. My main concerns are going to be traffic, because the only way in is 93rd Street. There's only two entrances to it. 93rd Street's going to be a heavily populated road now. The intersection that comes out to Old Cheney, I mean, everybody's using it as far as that. And then emergency vehicles getting in. Are people going to start parking on 93rd Street and clogging up the whole street? Another concern of mine is watershed. I already have water problems at my house. This land is on a hill. Are they cutting it out? Are they bringing in fill? What are they going to do about the water problems? Another concern is, like he said, somebody could come in and make rentals out of these triplexes or these row houses. There's nothing to stop anybody from doing that. And then my biggest concern is my daughter goes to Cleft Corn Elementary. They're at max capacity now. If we bring in 134 units of kids, where are they going to go? Cleft Corn's a closed section school. It's at 485 occupants right now. That's pushing the limits. If they were to go more, they'd have to expand, is what I was told from the principal of the school. Those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in opposition.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Jeremy Kramer, 9210 Rockland Circle. I live directly west to this proposed development. I don't have the map up here, but if I did, you'd see I'm I think the third cul-de-sac down on the map. So moved into the neighborhood in 2015 and love the neighborhood. It's a beautiful addition, and we've enjoyed that green space right across the street from us. Understood at the time, and we asked lots of questions what that land was, proposed for, and what it might happen to it someday. We knew, in the beginning it was proposed for the middle school, and hopefully that's what it was going to turn into. As it is, it's not. The land was sold, but now they're looking at proposing this huge development. At the meeting, they said 135 units. Now, on that docket, it's set up to 199. whether that's going to happen or not, that's a huge issue for us. 93rd Street, those condos are talking about 9. I believe each condo is going to have 2 garages. That's going to be 18 cars parked coming in and out every day. How are they going to, control the traffic coming in and out of 93rd Street? That is a major thoroughfare through that neighborhood. I don't understand how that's an additional 130 units, possibly 260 cars. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. What's that going to look like? Am I going to get to work on time? How are others going to get in and out of that neighborhood? Secondly, you talk about, the home values, increasing the value of the property. We live right across the street. It's a $400,000 home. I don't see how building a home that's $250,000 is going to increase my property value. It's going to depreciate my property value. I don't feel like this is a good fit. They say it's going to complement Vintage Heights. I don't see how it complements the area. The green space that they're talking about at the bottom, the south part of that, over that gas line, if that's a possible explosion or safety hazard, do we want kids and families down there playing around? Those are my concerns, and I just don't feel like this complements Vintage Heights at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in opposition.
Hello. My name's Lori Smith, 9338 Forest Glen Drive. I'd like to speak in opposition to this project. As far as it just seems so overpopulated for this neighborhood. The units are so small, especially, we don't have any of these row houses. They're thinking about putting 19 row houses. I had never even heard of a row house before, so I did go and look at them, and I was mortified. That is not going to be a good situation for this neighborhood. Also, I'm sorry, I'd also like to ask about, I hope it'll show up. How do I do it?
It's magic.
It'll come up.
Just set it down? Okay. This is one of my next questions. These little circles here are trees, but a few years ago, the trees had a problem, the trees had a problem where they had to be, either 2 or 3 of them had to be taken out because of the bugs that were infesting. So now this is a straight bare spot looking right in. And so I was already told this is going to go no matter what. So, but I think we need some mature trees here, so it does block the view and also return it to how it was supposed to be before the trees were removed a couple of years ago. So that's it. Okay, and I'm sorry for my granddaughter.
That's fine.
But she's the inheritor.
Other testimony in opposition.
My name is Wayne Jansen. I live at 9200 Maryvale. Maryvale is going to be one of the streets that comes out of this. And I think if you look at the plat map there that they have, you can see that this particular development looks like the chambers of a beehive in a pasture. I mean, this is not anywhere close to what the tenor is of the entire neighborhood. The reason it's that way is because you can make more money off of something if you make them smaller and pack them in. But it's the rest of us, the people who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to build these houses in this area. We've lived there since about 2000. And we realized there'd be a school. But a school is not going to give us the constant traffic that this place is going to give. It could be as many as 400 cars coming up to 93rd and Old Cheney every morning, every night, and through the day. One of the things you don't see on this map is that you go out to 98th and Old Cheney, and there's a roundabout there. So what that roundabout does is when you come up in the mornings or anytime, come up to 93rd and Old Cheney from the south, those cars are metered out through that roundabout. There is just never time. I mean, there is time eventually, but it takes a long time to find enough room to get on to Old Cheney. If we add 300 to 400 cars using that intersection, that's going to be a real problem. Now, I know what you say, well, we can just put a light in there and such, and we'll be in fine shape. It comes over a hill to this particular location. Right now, everything was working fine. I mean, there's some delay, but it works. If you put all these houses in there, something's going to have to be done about that intersection. There's no way that you can get around that. And again, it's just like a beehive in a pasture. And we bought those houses are in that area to be in a pasture. From the developments in Lincoln, one of the advantages of Vintage Heights is there's some room between lots. Some of these lots are only 20 feet wide. Okay, and they talk about, well, we want to have beautiful lawns and everything. Well, that's all fine and good, but they're talking about making this a part of the Vintage Heights Homeowners Association. So is the Vintage Heights Homeowners Association going to pay to mow the yards and remove the snow on these? To the east of this, there was a sewage pump that was going to be put in. And the builders at that time decided, well, hey, what we'll do is we'll build this and then we'll just dump it on the homeowners association and they can be the ones who worry about what happens with it in the future. Eventually the city council said, no, if you build the sewage pump, only the houses that are benefited can be a part of that. They're the only ones that need to pay for it, not the rest of the group. I certainly don't want my homeowners association fees to go up to remove somebody else's snow, especially the quantity of snow that'll be in that little beehive. So I think everything considered, I would rather see this come out to be the same as the neighborhood has been. Across the street to the north, Sand Hills Court, I don't know if any of you remember that. But in order to build Sand Hills Court, they had to violate almost every building code we had as far as area, lot width, lot depth. There's no sidewalks, there's no sewer, storm sewer there, nothing. And those houses, they're better than what's being proposed here, but it took a while to get rid of those houses. And they were supposed to be on affordable lots. I think the lots ended up selling for like $50,000 to $80,000 for these stupid lots, these small little lots. So, just in closing, as someone who builds a house in Lincoln, it would be really nice to be able to build a house and say the surrounding area is going to stay the way it was when I was enticed to build. Instead of, sure, you get me to invest $300,000 or $400,000, and then zip bang, you put a beehive in my backyard. Something that's going to affect my traffic. I think it's going to affect the property values. The good thing is there will be a nice row of compact houses and everything will be behind that. But still, that's a lot of occupancy there. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other testimony in opposition? Testimony in opposition. Okay. Staff questions. Do we have any more staff questions?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be LTU or some combination, but let's talk a little bit about traffic and traffic control and what that conversation's been to date.
Well, the 93rd Street connection to Old Cheney is an existing access point. Had they been going in and building 93rd Street, we probably would have required some improvements there by the developer. However, because it's already existing, those will be obligations that fall on the city of Lincoln. There will be traffic counts taken as this thing develops and as the Old Cheney Road improvements continue over to 98th. I'm sure this intersection will see some changes.
Okay. And right now it's a roundabout, correct?
No.
No.
That is not. 98th is a roundabout. This is
Right.
just a typical intersection.
Okay.
And
Not
this-
with turn lanes or,
There are not turn lanes.
okay,
And no deceleration lanes at the present time.
okay, thank you. And so how would that have compared to, your experience with if a school had gone on this site versus being developed as it is?
I think the
proposed?
difference is the school's peak hour traffic would be far above what this would generate in peak hour. Now, when you look at the rest of the time during the day, the school is probably a
Quieter.
lower volume of traffic, but at peak hour, the school would definitely be a much higher traffic count. The applicant's engineer may have done some computations on that, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Other questions for staff?
Is there parking currently on 93rd Street? Can you park on 93rd?
I believe there's no restriction for parking on 93rd.
Restriction on either side?
Right.
Steve, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Shane,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, I know one of the opponents stated something along the lines of watershed. Is that a concern?
They have to take care of the increase in runoff in that subdivision. That's controlled by our watershed management team. They will have to submit those calculations and proof that they're taking care of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Steve, in terms of general connectivity with the neighborhood, there's not a lot. Any concerns with a higher density use then? Or is the connectivity not as important to the department?
Well, I think, as we had noted in the beginning part of it, when this was originally laid out, and the thought was really that there was going to be a middle school here, Lincoln Public Schools was concerned that there really be the access focused on one part of it. And so as we were discussing, well, should there be other street access points from the east or the south would be quite difficult to do because of the difference in topography. Lincoln Public Schools at that time really didn't want to see additional access points from the east. So we don't have any additional access points from the east, and we think it's unlikely any of the streets to the east would change in character, so it's good to stub out a street to the east if we wanted to. So, this isn't a multifamily where you're having 20 dwelling units an acre and you have 400 or 500 units. It's a density that's appropriate to the R3, so we think that given the access that they have shown, it is appropriate.
And given the zoning that's in place, and as was pointed out, there's no rezoning that's required to
Correct.
accomplish this. And all of the waivers that are being requested are internal to the site? I mean, are affecting...
Correct. We're not they were not asking to reduce a setback to adjacent houses.
Zoning is what it is, Steve, but then why are we going through the CUP process and not just platting lots?
Oh, sure. The special permit is necessary because you can do single-family and two-family by right. It still would have to have done a preliminary plat to lay out the public streets. But because they had some different design elements in here, they wanted to have lots with a 0-foot setback, houses with a 0-foot setback to their lots. They also wanted to have 3 and 4 units connected together. They needed the special permit for that.
Sure. So in essence, we're talking about increased density, the end result of that process.
It's a good question as to could you have laid this out and meeting all of the R3 standards, still having the entire property all townhome lots, as to would it have been the same amount of density? It might have been a little bit less. It depends on how creative you can get with townhome developments.
Right. No, I just think that's an important point when you talk about zoning. And then, well, it's already zoned. You could just lay it out if you wanted to.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. And, I also wonder if, could you speak a little bit going forward with LPS sites in general? We can see now the differences in the department's point of view when it comes to connectivity and so on and so forth. On this site versus, how can you speak to changes that we see in terms like in Grandview, for example, in terms of how we might lay out a site if we don't have an idea that it'll be an LPS site?
Sure, we are trying to take into account with all of the LPS sites now that they could go one way or the other.
Sure.
And so having multiple street connections and pedestrian connections, so we do try to work with the LPS to provide that flexibility. LPS, I'll also have to say, sometimes has bought a site that is a little bit bigger than they need. That way, if it's absolutely finalized that, yep, this is where they're going to do and they're going to build a school, they could add potentially some additional lots if they have a little bit too much frontage from what we initially start with. But yes, certainly as we're talking about the high school sites, the far south high school site that is not in front of you yet, that one we're trying to have some multiple connections to it, including 2 connections off into the neighborhood to keep that flexibility for the future.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions for the applicant? Or, well, I'm sorry, you're not the applicant, you're the staff.
No, ma'am.
Ready for the applicant.
Staff did a nice job explaining the traffic. In fact, the conclusion was that the school would generate more traffic, and therefore we were not required to do a traffic study because of that factor, which I think is important to talk about. The other thing I would just point out is the homeowners association is in support. They recognize that we will work with them. This neighborhood isn't pure to begin with. There are some other beehives. I've never heard that term, but I'll just quickly show you a map showing you other areas of townhomes or mixed areas that are in the neighborhood already. So I think the homeowners association realizes that there is quality to diversity of style and choices. And when it comes to working with them, just the snow removal and cutting our grass will be our own association. It's where we're going to be sharing is that big 7-acre area to the south. That's where we'll join. That's where we'll work with them. If we need to put a tree in or something, we'll work and put a tree in. Most people with those townhomes to the south should enjoy having 7 acres of open space next to them, but if that's a problem, we'll try to work with them to make that go forward. Again, these are intended to be for sale and not rental homes that you heard. Lincoln Public Schools has not raised the issue that they're worried about the overcrowding that was raised. And we are not seeking 199 units. We are only seeking 133. The potential is there, but that's not our goal. We feel we have done as much as we want to try to do in this case to make it go forward. And I would just, again, point out the staff's real conclusion here, and I'll just read it. The proposed mix of dwelling types within a single development is consistent with the comp plan, which calls for such housing diversity. It helps create neighborhood character while providing a range of housing choices for the residents of the city. This is the type of infill in terms of both density and variety the plan encourages with no significant impact upon the adjacent residences. Brad.
Thank you. I did want to address the concerns about the traffic a little bit, but we did look at traffic counts, and I'll just go ahead and put these up here. We actually ran it against an elementary school, which would probably be a little bit smaller, but I think it drives home kind of the numbers that we want to communicate here. The daily trips that are going to be generated from the site are reduced by about 22%. The most notable is the morning drop-offs, bringing kids to school, comparison to people leaving for work and so forth. The reduction's 85% in the peak hour in the mornings. And then the evening was a reduction of 22% as well. So it does generate less from what we're proposing on the density compared to a school that when in comparison. I did want to touch upon the drainage really quickly. Vintage Heights was a series of preliminary plats. This was actually part of the 4th edition. The 4th edition did have grading and drainage that included this parcel of property. So it is actually accounted for in detention actually at a site just south and west of this property in an outlot. However, we do show detention on the open space and included in that 7-acre parcel in that pipeline planning area that will treat additional runoff and water quality that was not implemented on the days of the 4th edition preliminary plat. The outlot, the 7-acre parcel, the developers have proposed to include some of the amenities as part of this. If the UHOA does go through and take on the ownership, and they do share that parcel, then the developer would be putting in that parking lot that Steve had talked about, in addition to walkway paths that would be concrete, and then maybe some other small minor amenities. But landscaping is included in that. I'll note that one of the opponents here stated that along Forest Glen there are trees. There is intent to keep those. I wasn't aware that they were diseased or they may be falling to the ash borer, but the intent is to maintain those and add a little bit. I don't know that that's the particular place. This is a big 7-acre parcel that would be spread out with some additional landscaping. There's an easement there right over the top of that gas line, and Northern Natural Gas actually owns that easement, and we'll be working with them what we can and cannot do. We would like to add just a little additional berm separating the homes from. Right now, there's about a 300-foot space between those properties to the south to the first dwelling unit, but we would like to do some grading in those particular areas, but we'll have to get the approval, Northern Natural, to do exactly what we want. But to note, there are some retaining walls along that south property line as well. Forest Glen sits way below the proposed project, and there's about around 20 feet of elevation difference. So those homes that are sitting on Forest Glen will have probably no view sight of the row houses that are the first dwelling units on the south end of this project. I think I touched upon everything I wanted to. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Would you be willing, one of the neighbors talked about those, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. I'm assuming maybe there are ash trees there that they've lost. Would you be willing to plant some more trees?
I think as of the overall project, we do intend to include some additional trees there. Those trees are actually just right above the retaining wall. They're on slope right now. As part of my discussion with Northern Natural, I have to make sure that they're going to even accept trees in those particular locations. But yeah, we will be looking at our options there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for applicant? Okay.
I would move we close the public hearing.
Second, Albadri.
Jerry.
Okay, this is closed public hearing on special permit 20003. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I would then move that we approve special permit 20003.
Okay, there is a motion to amend to include an additional condition, 1.1.
Yes, 1.1 with 1.1.11.
Okay. And who seconded? I'm sorry.
Second.
Second, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tracy.
No, that's all right.
If I can speak to this, I applaud this development, this layout. Having developed Village Gardens, we have the same type of combination with lots that have houses on them up to 1.2 million right across from this type of a project. And I can tell you that the cottage areas and the 4 and 5 unit row houses will sell out very quickly. I've been amazed at, as Mr. Croker has built several in our development, and he can tell you better, but I kept seeing a sold sign constantly appearing. It is a price point that is not necessarily as available anymore in the community, and the cottages on their own individual lots, it creates then an outlot all around them for those green spaces. And we, as a homeowners association, then have different costs. A single-family lot is $500 a year in our development. These types of properties pay $1,200 a year. And that gives them their snow removal and their mowing and so on. So, and it's all within the same homeowners association. So it can be done, and it makes a nice complement to the development.
I will also support the motion, but I can also fully understand some of the neighborhood concerns, because not everyone wants to live in a neighborhood like that. I wouldn't. And I don't think that that's necessarily a relevant talking point a lot of the time. I think this development makes a lot of sense, but I can also understand that it could be a shock to the neighborhood, seeing what's generally around it. I can sympathize with that point of view for sure. And so I will support this. However, I also think that it's somewhat problematic to have an owner who says, I don't want connectivity, I don't want these lanes of traffic accessing my site, and then, oh, by the way, when it comes time for me not to use it, I'm very interested in doing what I can to get higher uses out of it. You can support Lincoln Public Schools and not like everything that they do or whatever deals they choose to make. But I think that generally speaking, I am familiar with some of the building product that these gentlemen are proposing building here at this site. I think it will pleasantly surprise you. I think that you will be delighted by some of the products that they have. Price per square foot, I don't know that it's necessarily going to harm your value. Price per square foot might actually improve your value depending on the final sales price of these homes. So, but I do understand and can sympathize that this could be a shock to what is currently in this neighborhood and the lot sizes that currently exist.
Any other comments? Okay, Jerry.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of special permit 20003 as amended, as presented by staff. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, under existing or pre-existing special permit, we have item 4.5, pre-existing special permit 23I to expand the area of the special permit to add parking on property generally located at 5034 Madison and 5043 Huntington Avenues. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
No.
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
No.
Tom Chaka, planning staff. This application is to expand the boundary of the special permit for Wesleyan University. Basically, there's two places. Pull it down here. One's on the north side on Madison, this area right here, and then down here on Huntington. The proposal is that those two lots would be used for parking. Currently, there was a house on here that has since been removed. There is a house here which would need to be removed if the special permit's approved for parking. Really, it's pretty that simple.
Any questions for staff? Okay, applicant.
Good, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900 here in Lincoln. Appearing before you today on behalf of Nebraska Wesleyan University. With me is Tish Gade Jones, the Vice President for Finance and Administration of Nebraska Wesleyan. Tim Gergen was here, but I think he had to leave for another meeting, so hopefully I can answer any engineering questions that you may have. The one thing I wanted to start out with is that you'll note on your agenda, this is a special permit called a pre-existing special permit. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the use exists long before it was regulated. The special permit was issued by the City of Lincoln long after Nebraska Wesleyan University campus existed. And so it's the land use rules by which the Nebraska Wesleyan University campus operates is pursuant to the special permit. Tom Chick is correct. It's a pretty simple application dealing with the addition of a parking lot on 5034 Madison and also 5043 Huntington Avenue, because parking independently is not a permitted use in the R6 zone. So the only way that the use as a parking lot can exist is pursuant to the special permit. The comprehensive plan does a pretty good explanation of most land use items here that certainly you confront as a balancing of interests. And Nebraska Wesleyan University plays this balancing game all the time in trying to balance the interests of preserving the neighborhood character while also allowing for future expansion. And that's certainly one of the cornerstones of the land use policy for Nebraska Wesleyan University. The real thing I really wanted to talk to you about, you had a couple letters from one of the neighbors, Bob McDonald. I think the signs went up probably towards the end of January, but prior to the signs going up, the Nebraska Wesleyan University sent letters to all the adjoining neighbors within about a 1-block radius of these parking lots, informing them of what's going on and what the schedule was going to be, and certainly before, and told them of the public hearing that was scheduled for today. And then also that they did meet with Mr. McDonald. He's not able to be here today, but they did meet with him last Friday, I believe. The one issue he obviously disagreed with was the removal of the home up on Madison Avenue. Independently, that decision was made to remove that home because of numerous factors. Nebraska Wesleyan acquired it in 1998, and it's been empty for the last 4 or 5 years. And because of the ongoing costs to secure it, to insure it, to maintain it, and the building had asbestos and it had mold, and those were costs that the university couldn't really see to try to resolve. They acquired it in 1988. It was used for single family, it was converted into apartments long ago. 5 apartments was the use, and it was individually leased. In 2003, it was converted to a fraternity use, and it was used that way for 12 years, but it's been vacant since 2015. Nebraska Wesleyan has learned that students don't like to live in these types of group homes, these communal type living arrangements, and there's not been a use identified for the last 4 or 5 years. The other thing that happened concurrently, in 2016, the City of Lincoln approved Special Permit 23H. The one before you today is 23I. 23H approved the new Science Focus building that was constructed at the right-of-way of 50th Street and the parking lots located west of 50th Street on the west edge of campus. What has happened as a part of that Science Focus building is that the enrollment of the Nebraska Wesleyan University is increased by approximately 19%. It's gone from 1,438 student population in 2015. It's projected for next fall to be 1,711 students. It's a significant growth. More students means no more housing. More students means more parking, and the university is trying to accommodate that. One question could be asked, we're only getting 16 parking stalls up on Madison Avenue, and only getting 6 more stalls down in Huntington. Is this worth it to go through this process? I think the answer is twofold. Number one, in that balancing of interests, one of the things that we try to do, and the comp plan requires, is to preserve the character of the neighborhood. That means we comply with all the design standards for parking lot screening and parking lot distances. And consequently, you don't get as many stalls. The other thing I would add is that the parking lot itself is an interim use. I think the Science Building is a good example. The Science Building was located on the 50th Street right-of-way, plus parking lots that had been assembled over the years. And the parking use is an interim use until a higher and better use can be formulated. So that's where we're here in front of you today. The Nebraska Wesleyan does try to assemble properties as they become available. They're a willing buyer without the power of eminent domain, but we do take the opportunity when possible to assemble properties around campus and include them in the special permit and work with the city on that front. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't see any.
Thank you.
Testimony and support. Testimony in opposition. Any staff questions? Applicant, do you want to come back up? Okay.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second, Finnegan.
Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
I would move that we approve pre-existing special permit 23I.
I'd second, Finnegan.
This looks like a good plan, and while I'm never really a huge fan of tearing down single-family houses or houses in general, I understand the need for parking in the area, and I think this is a wise move on the part of Wesleyan.
And it's always, these kind of things are always a give and take between a neighborhood and an expanding educational facility. And I think that we understand that and can appreciate that.
And I think Wesleyan has done a good job of renting houses that they own if the structure is sound. And in both cases, it does not sound like these structures have been very sound.
Yeah. Okay, Jerry.
And this is for the conditional approval of pre-existing special permit 23I. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, I would just note again that item 5.1, special permit 15062A has been placed on pending at the request of the applicant.
At this time, if we have anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda, they may do so.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Jerry?
Okay, Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We're adjourned.
Jerry, you win.